Hey everyone, it's Sam, and welcome back to the 911 Nonsense podcast. To stay in the loop, learn about upcoming guests, and join in the conversations with the Noon community, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And hey, if you like what you hear in this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support means the world to us. All right, Sean, thanks for joining us on the Noon podcast. How you doing today?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's so great to see your face. It's been so long.
Same.
Can I go ahead and get an introduction, Sean?
Absolutely. My name is Sean Robertson. I have been a paramedic since May of 1995. I started in EMS in 1992 as an EMT basic. I work for a large 911 ambulance provider now as I lead out their education department, but I spent 26 years in the field working 911, both high performance urban EMS and also tribal rural EMS.
Which one did you like better?
It's a toss-up. I love the high performance EMS because I got a chance to interact with multiple individuals in a day. And I love the tribal EMS because transport times are really long, and we got to see some pretty cool things out there too. So
yeah, you get to really enjoy the medicine when you have those long transports. You get to see what you're doing that helps or makes it worse, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great time. And so I worked with you in that high call volume place, and you and I were talking a little bit about it before. 28 years, man. 28 years. That is insane. How did you keep your sanity?
I got to be honest. Acts of service are my primary love language. So just being able to envision myself being there to serve individuals in need, whether it was a true emergency or not, it was generally it's their perception. They're perceiving they're having an emergency. So I was able to do the thing that I love to do, for a long time. And now physically I'm not as able to go out, in a high performance 911 setting and take care of individual patients. So I, as an education leader, I actually get to serve the folks that are serving the people. So it's still gratifying to me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you talked about not being able to physically, but I mean, that job is a very demanding physically and mentally job. Did you ever get injured at all throughout the process of your career?
Oh, I'm almost as broken as as a 73 Ford truck. I had multiple back injuries, multiple knee and shoulder injuries. I've been assaulted I don't know how many times usually by individuals who weren't in their right mind. I had the ability to apply verbal judo to folks that were just angry or having psych issues. But folks under the influence often would want to fight, and we'd have to restrain them, and it hurts. The back injuries led to an actual physical diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis. So that effectively ended my ability to work full time on an ambulance, just because of all the inflammation in my lower back and such. But it's all right. I still get to interact with all the individuals who are out there on the front lines taking care and serving the people. So I'll take what I can. Those that can't do teach. So all right. I've embraced it, and we're going to move forward with it.
I'm glad that you used that statement because when I've heard it used, it's often because people can't perform the medicine and not in a physical capability, right? Usually in a in a mental way. You can't think fast enough, you can't perform fast enough. So it's funny that you use it in that way, and it's actually really interesting because it just sparks that like change. And a lot of the time all we need is that little bit of change to kind of fix how things fit for us in our heads, our own heads, right?
Absolutely. Well, if you were to ask my brain how old I am, I'd tell you I was 18. But if you'd ask my body how old I am, it's probably say that I'm a septuagenarian. So, it's all relative. You think you can do things that you just can't physically do anymore. And when you come to the realization that you still have your mental faculties intact, you can help others, perfect their craft and make sure they're giving good care. So
So do you feel that that was a big transition for you going from the field into a teaching? Because I know you've always been kind of a pretty good educator. Even when you were running just the trucks, you were constantly teaching. So do you feel that that was a big change for you?
I don't think so. I think it's just the natural evolution of me getting older. I worked as in the capacity of a field trainer for 17 years. And then I actually worked on a truck and was a full-time educator at a rural tribal EMS service for 8 years. So it was just a natural transition.
That's awesome. Did you have to get a lot of extra certs or anything like that to go from your 911 service to your education?
Not at all. I already had the teaching certificates and the experience, and it was just, kind of a natural transition.
That's fantastic. I know for some people it's a little bit harder. I've had to kind of bust my butt in the last couple of years to get my instructor cards. Do you know how hard it is to get instructor cards these days?
It's terribly hard.
It's so hard.
COVID made everything hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's hard because people don't want to give up that piece of the pie, right? And that's the problem. So if we have more instructors in, then the people who use that as an actual business don't get paid as much because you have people going and promoting the wrong things. But it also makes it hard because some people just go out and teach not great things, right? Like if you're teaching CPR, have you taught that if you're not cracking ribs, right? If you're not breaking ribs, you're not doing CPR correct.
At least 2 inches. That's right.
Yeah.
And that means that you're going to feel crunchies, and it's not very pleasant.
No, but you're not always going to feel the crunchies, right? And it's
No, not always.
people are telling, like, you have people teaching that if you're not touching those ribs to that spine, you're not doing it
Yeah,
correct. And that kind of makes
yeah,
it difficult for people as providers.
absolutely. Well, that's universal across any job, though. You're going to have individuals that aren't the best, and we try to do the best we can and hope for the best for others, I guess.
Right? Because as adult learners, we can be difficult sometimes.
Oh, a little bit.
What do you think is what is your passion subject? What's your favorite thing to teach?
I would say that my favorite thing to teach is anything about asthma, specifically asthma, because I am a lifelong asthmatic. I grew up when actually I was hospitalized 6 times before I was 5 years old with pneumonia secondary to asthma. I was in the ICU 4 of those times, and I went into respiratory arrest at least once. My parents know for sure. So if I go off the rails or start acting weird, that's probably just sequelae from anoxic brain trauma when I was 4 years old.
You can't use that as an excuse.
Anything to do with asthma, I love it. In fact, I taught a pediatric asthma module in class this last week. Anything like that.
That's really cool. And it's not one that you see a lot of. Usually it's the people who are very passionate about it are the ones that are teaching it, right? Like, so that's really cool. And it's great to hear that you're doing both adult and pediatric. So you said that you had gone into respiratory failure at least once. So were you tubed more than once or were you intubated more than once?
I don't know. my parents don't know because they're not medically literate. And the doctors that treated me, none of them, and the nurses as well, none of them are alive anymore to ask. So I don't know. It's a miracle that I'm here, and I accept that. And that the fact that I was able to survive growing up in a rural setting, going to a tiny hospital and being treated and still survive, I think that lends to probably the reason why I became a paramedic. And that's just to be there for folks.
Yeah, and it's really actually kind of funny to think, right? Because we're in a time right now where we have electronic charting. It's funny to think back before electronic, there was paper, and then before paper, you got what you got, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I always wondered, are my records on microfiche? Somewhere there at that tiny little country hospital. I don't know. It's a long time ago.
And what is microfiche?
Okay, so now we're talking age disparity. So microfiche is a way of archiving records, in that they would take pictures of the records. And then, do you remember if you took a camera to the Kodak place or Walgreens or whatever, and you got the pictures back, and they would come back with the negatives?
Mm-hmm.
Microfiche is just a big sheet of photo negatives that you'd have to sit down in front of a special machine that magnified it and lit it from underneath, and you'd have to search all through the things for it. It's technology that probably coincides with maybe the first moon landing. Yeah. So when I say I'm old, I mean I'm old. Paleomedic applies when you throw it at me.
Hey, those machines are actually really cool. I've seen those on TV.
Yeah, there you go.
That's really cool. I was a sickly child, so I wonder if any of my records on there. I'll have to look that up because I'd never heard of it before, clearly. Um, so that's really cool. I love learning new things.
Yeah.
You'll have to look and let me know if you find any of your stuff on there.
Yeah, well, that's definitely worth a check.
Yeah, I wonder how many people don't know about that. Let me know if you're listening, if you've ever heard of microfiche and you think you might have records on there. That's actually a really cool thing. And I wonder, do you go to the hospital to find that, or is it something that would be at a library,
So back in the day, you could go to a library and get microfiche records of archived newspapers and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that same technology possibly exists, but it's probably digital images in a cloud that you access on a computer now.
That's so crazy.
I actually researched the 1980 Miracle on Ice in my 8th grade class, and I had to access newspaper articles on microfiche in the school library.
In 1980? I won't tell you where I was in 1980. Anyways. So did you ever deal with any other major injuries or anything because of work?
Not physical. I would say that possibly the biggest trauma that I suffered on the job was most outside of my back and in my joint injuries and such was mental.
That's a big one, right?
Absolutely. That's probably the biggest hit that my body took.
Yeah. I mean, you were hanging out before we had CISD or anything like that. And you said you started in 92, where a lot of the time they were just telling you well, this is the job you signed up for, right? Suck it up.
Suck it up and move on.
That's right.
Actually, I was lucky because my volunteer service was one of the first in the state of Arizona to adopt critical incident stress debriefing. So it was about 2 years after I got my EMT basic that I experienced probably the worst call of my career, in that we had a 8-month-old who was lit on fire by his older brother, and we transported this little kiddo to the hospital, and everyone involved was just beside themselves and didn't know what to do. And it was a turning point in my career. It was very likely at the time that I was not going to be an EMT anymore. And they brought in an individual from the Department of Health, Arizona Department of Health, who had just taken a critical incident stress debriefing training course, and we were there first. And I attribute, being able to continue my career to in the moment, mitigation of mental health crises like that.
That's crazy and fantastic that they were able to provide that for you, because there are a lot of career enders even to this day where somebody just sees the wrong thing, or like mentally sees the wrong thing, and they're just done. They walk out of the job and they don't come back. So that's a really big statement, saying that you were able to get that help and that helped you. What do you think was the saving grace there?
Well, I think in the moment, critical incident stress management is super beneficial. It's not enough to get you through decades of trauma and assaults and seeing horrible, terrible things done to at-risk individuals, whether it's elderly or pediatrics. The other key to the pie is counseling. I actually almost quit the job again after a guy who had a mental break and thought that I was there to take the unicorn that was in his bedroom from him, almost shot me and my partner.
Oh, man.
This is when I was working at the high volume 911 service. I actually went to our employee assistance program, our EAP provider, and when the really nice lady asked me if I wanted to do this as an outpatient or if I should, if she should help me get time off, I told her, ma'am, it doesn't matter when this doesn't work, I'm quitting my job. And she's like, oh, well, let's just see if we can't get you 8 weeks off to start. So she helped me fill out my FML paperwork. And I started counseling with one of the best counselors I've ever met in my life. And right away, he knew I should probably take part in EMDR. At this point, I had been a paramedic for about 15 years. And I spent the next 8 weeks just unloading 15 years worth of trauma onto this poor counselor while, EMDR was being performed. And it saved my career. I have zero doubt that it saved my career. And I can't recommend it highly enough. And I feel like it's underutilized even to this day. I feel like it's stigmatized. And here's the bottom line. We all carry around our own individual coping containers, and they're each different sized. Some of us have the ability to cope a lot and to take a lot in and to cope with it and just carry it. Some don't. But eventually, every single coping container is going to get full and start overflowing, and you're going to start seeing negative effects from it. It's going to be negative health effects. It's going to affect your relationships. It's going to affect your job performance. It's going to affect everything in your life. And if you don't deal with it, it could end up causing you to make really terrible choices, whether it comes to substance abuse or even the ultimate terrible choice, which is to end your own life. And it's avoidable, 100%. So I will forever die on the hill that every pre-hospital provider needs to have a counselor that they visit. And if you've been doing this long enough, you should probably have EMDR therapy or something equivalent to help you process those things that your body just can't process on its own.
Can you explain what your process with EMDR was? Like, what was your typical visit like?
So it was an hour long, and I would wear some headphones, and I would hold some little vibrating pucks in my hand that the pucks would vibrate synced up with a beep alternating each side. So I would hear a beep in my right ear and feel the puck vibrate in my right hand. And it would go back and forth at a cadence of about maybe 70 beats a minute. And I would just have these in my head, on my hands, these pucks in my hands and the earphones on my head. And then I would just recount the calls that really bothered me. And you know the calls that bother you. They're the ones that involve kids. or they're the ones that you perceive a ton of injustice was done, or the ones that took you by surprise and you didn't expect to see that. Whether it's the 22-month-old whose dad shot her despite her mom, or the 4-year-old who is sodomized and shaken to death by mom's boyfriend, on and on and on. And you just recount the details of these calls. And oftentimes these calls will elicit a physical response if they're bothering you bad enough. And what EMDR does, as I was explained by the counselor, is it moves those memories from your short-term memory where they can elicit physical manifestations, you smell smells and hear sounds, into long-term memory. You never really forget them, but it doesn't make you sick to remember them anymore.
That's a great explanation. Thank you. Do you feel comfortable talking a little bit more about those 2 calls that you discussed as the almost career enders?
Oh, it's funny. Neither of them together were career enders. The one call that almost ended my career before it really got started was the 8-month-old who had burned to death. And it's odd. I was volunteering with a small town EMS service and fire department, and we were called out with the fire department to respond to our neighboring town. The towns abut. They're joined together, little twin towns. So I went to the fire station and got my turnouts on, and it was an old Seagraves engine. So the driver and the captain sat up front, and me and another pipeman hopped on the back and rode tiller. We strapped ourselves onto the bumper and just stood there while the engine drove us up there. And we pulled up, and I hopped off, and I got ready to pull a hose line, and someone hollered that the paramedic on the ambulance needed an EMT. So I was like, well, yeah, I'll go. So I hopped in the ambulance, and I saw the paramedic, and this was tenured medic, and his face was pale white, and his eyes were, like saucers. And I looked down, and he had on the bench seat, it looked like a little African-American baby doll. And I told him, his name was Mark. I said, Mark, what's up with the doll? And he reached over and pulled down the diaper to expose pink skin. And it was the baby that was burned. And I said, well, do you want me to start chest compressions? What do you need? And he said, I tried. The baby's too hot. Can't keep my hands on it. So I said, well, okay. What do we do? And he said, I don't know. So we just drove to the hospital and then carried the little baby inside, moved him onto a towel so it wasn't too hot to carry. And a couple of things I remember strikingly, even now, even after EMDR, I remember seeing the imprint on the vinyl bench seat of the baby because he was so hot that he kind of sunk down into it. And then I remember the parents' reactions when they were allowed in to see the baby. So those are the 2 things that still stand out to me. And I can't smell the smells anymore, and I don't hear the screams anymore. I just remember them, but it's still kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's uncomfortable. So thank you so much for sharing, because I know that's hard. Again, this was right after you started, right? You said 2 years into your career, so like 94-ish.
Yeah.
Was that a time when we just transported kids? Like basically you transported any codes just because maybe there was a chance?
Yeah, well, the idea then was that they weren't dead until they were declared dead in the hospital. So you just performed CPR, whether it was transporting them down from the mountain. They had some mountain lakes nearby. If they got struck by lightning, then it was an hour and a half of chest compressions till you got to the hospital. Same with kids. It didn't matter. You loaded them up and you took them to the hospital, and then it was all dealt with there. So yeah, it was a little bit of a different time. It was a little simpler than it is now, and it was a little easier to operate there because we were a fairly small tight knit group of volunteers who knew each other pretty well and had some pretty good protocols. So there was never any strife or arguing when it came to that. We just kind of all agreed that we just take him to the hospital, and the hospital was fine with that because they were a tiny little hospital. They were never really busy anyways. So
Yeah, I think it's really cool to see the dynamic of small hospitals and small EMS communities. You see a lot, like you described it, it's a lot more tight knit than you see in some of the bigger cities. A lot of the time it's just pointing the finger and pointing the blame. One of my very first codes that I worked by myself as an EMT was a prisoner who hung himself. And I was super proud as an EMT intermediate because we did chest compressions and I got an IV and we gave epi and we got pulses back on this guy. This was back when I was like, still real innocent
oh sure, sure.
and young and in the throes of my career. So we transported this guy and the hospital said, you need to stop. You need to call the code. He's basically going to be anoxic and you need to pull over and call the code. And we're like, what? What? Are you kidding? And then I actually got a lot of crap from my supervisor also because they were like, you should have just called it. As an intermediate, I can't call codes. I can't do that. I
No,
didn't even know. It's really funny when you go from smaller to bigger. You talked a little bit too about the call where the guy pointed a gun at you also, and I mean, that's pretty critical. That is pretty memorable. What did you do in that situation? Was it just you and your partner, and how did you diffuse it and remove yourself?
that I gave a real high level overview. It's a little more complex. My partner and I were dispatched to a sick call, and it came out as a 26 Alpha 10. If you know NPDS codes, it was a sick call unknown, and I was knocking at the door of this house, and the front door was actually down on the side of the garage, and there was a window there over to my left shoulder, and I was knocking on the door, and no one was answering. It was, paramedics. And about that time, I heard two cars like screech to a halt, and two police officers came running down the sidewalk yelling, "The occupant has a gun. He needs you to back off." So, of course, my partner and I backed off, and police cleared the scene about that time. And we were first on, by the way. That's why I was knocking on the door. Police cleared the scene. Fire came in, assessed the guy, and they were all sitting in the garage. And the fire department medic was a buddy of mine, and he said, "Hey, Sean, come here. I'll show you something." And I said, "Okay." And so he took me to the other side of the window where I was standing, and he's like, "This guy looks like he almost shot you." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I looked down, and there was a Beretta 9mm with 3 loaded magazines next to it, and it was cocked and locked. And I was like, "Wow, okay." So we transported this guy, and the guy was profusely apologetic. He's like, "I thought you were here to steal my unicorn. I almost shot you." I'm like, "Well, I'm glad you didn't. Very thankful that you didn't shoot me, sir." And I took good care of him. And after the call was done, it all hit me. I almost widowed my wife. I almost orphaned my kids. And it was the final drop in my coping container, the final one. So
It's scary to think about, and it also like makes you question going into the next person's house, right? Like sometimes you get those tinglies and then sometimes you get those 26 alphas that you're like, okay, this is another sick person, not a big deal. Like, let's get it over with.
well, I mean, you just never know. And I was raised in the Christian faith, and I always believed that my guardian angel worked overtime, covering my tail while I was working for the urban EMS service. But yeah, I chalked that up to a mom who prayed for me, and just I got lucky. It could have gone the wrong way really quickly, and often, I don't want to say oftentimes, but sometimes it does.
Yeah. I mean, it's really crazy that he didn't just start popping off when the cops showed up, which in like most of the time that is what would happen.
Yeah, it was just, the whole situation was it was surreal. It was odd.
Do you think that that would have affected everybody else the same way? Or do you think that it would have been something that was just like, meh, like not really thought about?
Well, my partner was an EMT intermediate who had 3 years experience, and she was fine. She's like, no, I'm fine. I can go back to work. So it, she was able to cope with it and move on. And I thought I would be okay to cope with it and move on too, but I wasn't. I maybe 10 years earlier in my career, I could have.
Right? So is it an age difference? Like I don't know how old your partner was at the time, but was it like an age difference? Was it a
I don't know. Human beings are so unique and diverse in what we are able to absorb and cope with. And I think part of it was that my partner didn't have as much, probably as many of those critical calls, those calls that really, really, deal you some damage in the psyche. And I think maybe that was the one that did it for me.
that is really hard. And that you said that was the time where you got 8 weeks off for FMLA.
Yeah. Yeah. I took 8 weeks off. And
How did your place of employment handle that 8 weeks?
they were supportive.
Good. That's good to hear.
Yeah, my director was very supportive. They would reach out just to check on me every once in a while, which I really appreciated. I didn't expect to receive the support that I received, and I think it probably helped turn me into the manager that I am now, because I try to emulate that as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It really makes a difference when you have somebody who's and not just one person, but a whole team, right? Who's really ready to rally behind you. So you've been in EMS for 28 years now. What's like your favorite go-to story? If somebody asks you, hey, what's like the coolest thing you've ever seen or the funniest thing you've ever seen, what's your number one go-to?
So I would have probably told you about some of our frequent flyers and how fun they were, up until I transported when I was working for the tribal EMS service, the rural EMS service. I want to say this was 2020. This was January of 2020. We were called to intercept with a woman in labor on the highway. She was in a privately owned vehicle, and we pulled over and we intercepted with them and get her in the back of the ambulance. And she's very pregnant. And she tells me this is her 5th pregnancy. She has 4 children. She's 41 weeks gestation, and she's contracting, and she's going to deliver the baby. And I said, okay, all right. Well, I get all this stuff up. I get a couple of towels on the gurney and a couple of chucks, and we get her bottoms off, and she starts contracting. I'm like, hey, I'm going to take a look, and well, she's crowning. I'm like, well, we're going to have a baby right here. So this Native American lady said, okay, and I get ready to help her with kind of stabilizing the baby's head as it comes out. And man, she, on the next contraction, she bears down, and out comes this beautiful little baby Native girl, and call, the amniotic sac intact. It was the most beautiful thing I've seen in my entire career. Just like you imagine the pictures, it's all it's all in the fetal position, true fetal position. And I took a couple of seconds just to kind of marvel at it, because I knew how rare that was.
Yeah.
And then it was back to business, and you break the sac open and dry, warm, and stimulate. It's just super healthy. I think the 1-minute APGAR on this little baby girl was a 6, because I had it so stinking hot in the back of the ambulance. And she had the largest the largest umbilical cord on a baby I'd ever seen. And so getting lots of good blood, lots of good oxygenated blood. And yeah, it was great. Just healthy. Not a problem with the baby one. Mom bled a lot. Once we got the cord clamped and cut, fundal pressure and massage didn't really help. So we had to hang Pitocin on her, even before the placenta was passed, but because she was bleeding so heavily. But staunch the bleeding, and we got both of them to the hospital.
That's really cool. And it's really cool that in the moment you were able to stop and be like, this is neat, right?
Yeah, consciously say to yourself, this is rare. Take it in, take a couple of seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when I went through paramedic school, and I can't say the same for you, but when I went, they didn't teach you about what to do if the baby comes out in this sack. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's really cool. And it is really beautiful. And that's really cool that you were able to describe it in that way. That's what a cool experience. Because, like you said, it is rare. Like, we've seen there every once in a while, you see the pictures that pop up, like on Facebook or whatever, medical app that you might be on, where it shows the baby coming out in the sack and they took the time to catch a picture of it. But that's how rare it
Yeah.
is. So it's really cool. That's a really
Oh
cool
yeah.
experience.
That's probably the best one in my career.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And what a great story. I'm actually surprised when I have talked to people through the podcast how many of their stories have to do with delivering babies. And it really is great to hear because a lot of my baby deliveries were not great deliveries. So it's good to hear great outcomes from so many other people because baby deliveries can be really bad or they can be just fine. And the majority of the time they are just fine.
Yeah, oh yeah. Women have been birthing babies without any assistance for thousands of years. So
Thousands and thousands of years. That is correct. Oh, that's fantastic. In your time in EMS, like what's been your favorite upgrade in tools? Like what's one of the coolest things you've gotten to see that you wouldn't have expected to see in the 90s?
Striker power load gurneys.
Oh, that's a good
A
one.
gurney that lifts itself up and then loads itself into the ambulance. If I would have had that when I started my career, my back wouldn't be in the position it's in now. I did the math, and back when we were physically lifting gurneys up off the ground and into the ambulance, I probably had, up and down, I probably had 30,000 lifts before we got our first power gurneys that would lift the patient up off the ground for you. But then you still had to load it. You had to bear that weight to load it.
Mm-hmm.
So, tens of thousands of weight-bearing incidents on your lumbar spine take a toll. Yeah, that's probably the one thing. And it's funny. It's not medication. It's not the fanciest life packs or anything else like that. It's a logistical means of moving people that's probably the most exciting thing than EMS that benefited me the most.
It is a very simple tool, and it feels like it could have been such a simple implementation earlier, but it's so expensive.
Yeah.
It is crazy to see how many of the smaller outlying communities still have manual stretchers.
Well, you're looking at, $40,000 total for one unit. And if you weigh that against the cost of a back injury, you're looking at $250,000 for your average back injury. So that's a no-brainer. But saying that to a service who relies on EMS, state fund act monies to the tune of maybe $10,000 or $20,000 a year to help run their service, you might as well be asking them to turn, water into wine or have King Midas come and turn something into gold for them. So
Yeah, it's crazy. You know what? The other day we flew into a city that it's a smaller city, but it has its own hospital, but the EMS system is all volunteer still. So this is a city that has an airport.
sure.
They have a huge number of people that go to them in the summer because of the activities that they offer. So they have a huge tourist visiting amount, and their EMS system is still volunteer. And how amazing, right, for that volunteer, that community, right? Because I did volunteering for 3 years. Amazing, but also crazy. Like, when is the line going to be drawn for hiring like a full-time EMS, either a paramedic or an EMT?
Well, yeah, and how do you get the funds to those smaller agencies where they can afford the cost? Because when you think about it, when you hire a full-time employee, you take their annual salary into account, but you also have to offer them benefits, right? And that's a monetary expense. So if they're making $60,000 a year, you're actually, as a company, paying out closer to 90 or 100,000 a year because of the benefits that you offer. If you are ethical and offer benefits, but you just described the service that I volunteered and grew up in, and so it's, I think, I don't know, folks from small towns are just, they're cut from a different cloth. They tend to show up for each other and support each other.
They are. I agree. It was just really impressive. It's both impressive and sad at the same time because, like I said, this city is huge with tourists. Like, really, there's almost no excuse for not having at least one full-time EMT because of the amount of transports that they request. They fly out constantly, and if they can't fly, because their area tends to be a little bit of a shit zone for really bad weather. So if like the helicopter can't get in or the airplane can't get in, then they're grounding those patients. And when I was talking to the EMTs, they can do an out-of-city transport 2 or 3 times in a 24-hour period. When you do that, though, you're taking that ambulance out of service. And what does that leave that town with?
Exactly.
Yeah, not much. It's pretty crazy to hear that in 2024 we have these little towns that still are completely volunteer. And it's not like where I volunteered at, we were at least really close to a city. So we could have mutual aid of a city truck coming in. This city is kind of isolated. So it blows my mind to think about it.
Well, it tells you that some of the town officials haven't had to use the local services or have to wait for an ambulance because the only volunteers were on an out-of-town transport. The second that happens, that's going to be a priority.
Right, and I think so. I would bet that they have used the service, but I bet they haven't had to wait, right? Because the community, like I said, they're all very close. The patient that we went to pick up actually was related to one of the volunteer members. So, that patient got taken care of. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't otherwise, but in such a small community that can make things a little bit difficult. It's crazy how we're so advanced in some places and not in others.
Yep, there's quite the disparity for sure.
Yeah. So you teach full time. What are you doing for your hobbies? How do you keep yourself busy?
Right now, we have a new puppy who's taking up a lot of our time. His name is Max, and he's a little needle mouth terror. But one of the things that brings me joy outside of hanging with my family is I buy old broken Nintendos and I refurbish them. I know they won't be able to see it in the podcast, but there's one that I just finished for a friend of mine.
Is that so do you just do the original Nintendos or do you like the Super Nintendo, N64?
Yeah, Super Nintendos too. Yeah, Super Nintendos, anything that's solid state. So if it has like electrolytic capacitors and contacts that can go bad, anything that I can unsolder and resolder a new component on and just kind of clean, and I'll use UV lights and peroxide solutions to take the yellowing out and make them look a little nicer. Yeah, I just, I got a lot of joy out of these video games when I was a young kid, and it helps calm me, I guess, to sit here and work on them.
Doing a little bit of tinkering. Do you still play games at all?
I do. Not as much. I don't have the time, and believe it or not, I think that as I've gotten older, I've developed a touch of ADD that I don't necessarily have the attention span to sit down for longer than 30 or 40 minutes and play a game. I can still sit down and read a book or watch a movie, but I'll sit down and play a video game. I'll play, Super Mario Brothers or something for 30 minutes, and then I'll be okay, and I can go do something else.
And when you play, are you playing on the original Nintendo or are you on an upgraded system?
Oh, I have a Switch that
Oh, okay.
I basically play all the old games on the Switch. Oh yeah, I mean I got a big TV. I don't have to look at a tiny CRT screen with the with the old ones, and I don't have to look at a poor connection. I can look at it in decent clarity. So I'm a little spoiled, but not 100%.
That's really cool. I actually enjoy on the Switch how they have the online membership where you pay once a year and you get to play a lot of the old games.
That's what I use. That and Animal Crossing,
Did you play any of the Zelda games?
all the Zelda games.
My wife is so sad that they didn't announce a new Animal Crossing game this year. I'm not gonna lie, I'm also sad that they didn't announce a new Animal Crossing game this year.
Animal Crossing helped get me through COVID.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but it helped get my wife and I through COVID. Yeah.
So does your wife play as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. We both have a Switch. We'll play Animal Crossing, go visit each other's islands and such. It's pretty cool.
I'm gonna have to get your friend code at the end of this so you can come and see my island. I'm doing a Zelda themed island based off of Ocarina of Time.
Oh yeah, I'm excited. Let's do it. I'll show you my island too. I've got I don't know how many hundreds of hours on it.
I know it's almost shameful. I don't want to admit. I could look it up, but I would bet that I have close to 400 or 500 hours on Animal Crossing alone.
Oh yeah, I'm not ashamed. I probably have that much too.
We got to do something, right? And during COVID, it was like the perfect time because it didn't that one come out during COVID?
It did. It came out the summer of 2020.
Yeah, I think that's what we spent a lot of our time doing as well. Are you excited for the new Zelda game?
I am. I think it's intriguing. I'm super interested to see it, and it's actually the three-quarter top-down view is my favorite style of Zelda. A Link to the Past is my favorite Zelda game of all time, so I'm really excited to play it.
That is exciting. It looks good. I'm also intrigued. It's they're taking a different stance on it, which I think is going to be really, really neat.
I always wondered when they were going to make Zelda a playable character. So,
And they are finally doing it. Yeah,
yep.
dude. I'm so excited for that. It's not even funny. So, what are Sean's plans for the next 5 years? What are your goals?
To improve the quality of the education department at my ambulance service. Um, that includes, standardizing airway management curriculum and investigating the possibility of getting our education department offerings CAPC accredited. I would say that's probably my 5-year goal. If at all possible, I'd like to do that because we have a lot of folks attend our CE offerings from all over the region, not just even the state anymore. And if we were able to offer CAPC accredited CEs, that would allow even more people to take advantage of that because some states require CAPC CEs only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, CAPSI is hard to get approved for. That's a good goal. Do you have ties already in place to get that started?
Yeah, we actually have a learning management system that lends itself to making the application process a lot less painful. We have an employee at our service who served a long time as a CAPC site visitor, an application site visitor. So I have essentially, the subject matter expert to tell me the things I need to do. It's just there's a few things that I need to get done first before I can go down the road. So it's more of a 5-year plan for me.
Sure. Are you guys offering online education as well?
So we offer online education for our providers. We develop a lot of online modules annually, and we offer 2 free offerings, to folks outside of our service. Annually, we call them mini conferences, and they can either come in and attend live or they can attend virtually via interactive Zoom. And the last one we had, I want to say 190 attendees through both sources.
190? That's impressive. That's really impressive. That means you guys are doing good stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why, investigating the possibility of CAPC just to help other services out, because we're the largest 911 provider in the state, and I feel like there are those rural volunteer providers that are out there working their 9 to 5 and then staying up till 3 in the morning transporting their neighbor who's having a heart attack to the nearest appropriate facility out of the goodness of their hearts doing this stuff. This is something we absolutely have the capacity to help with, getting them CEs that they don't have to pay for.
Yeah.
So
No, that's fantastic. That's really impressive. I think we should connect on some of that education stuff after also.
absolutely, be happy to share.
So what are you guys offering for mental health services through your department?
So we have two different organizations who provide counseling services free of charge for our providers. We have, of course, our standard employee assistance program, and we also partner with a counseling service called PSPG, and they're all phenomenal. We have a large peer support team, and that's because we have a very engaged social worker who's leading that out and getting our peer support team built up and mobilized so that we can go out there and support each other, because that's the first line, right?
Yep.
Of just making sure that we're looking after each other. The push for helping employees understand the benefits of taking care of their mental health is large. It's a large part of our orientation and onboarding process. All of the new employees that we hire land in my hierarchy for their orientation time, and I make sure to try to sit down with each of them and help them understand navigating once they clear, and after they've been here long enough to qualify for it, helping them navigate and understand the process for utilizing family medical leave. It's not just for, I have a chronic illness like diabetes or asthma, which it is for that, but it's also there to help support your mental health. And it's a benefit that is underutilized, and it can help prevent a lot of folks from walking into corrective action because of unplanned absences and such from work. So,
Would you recommend a mandated couple of sessions for mental health?
I think that if you are an American citizen who has the capacity to understand right and wrong, then you've lived long enough to probably need counseling. And I feel like every American citizen should have a counselor that they see at least regularly, if not as needed. I hope that we figure out a way to destigmatize the whole mental health process and self-care process, because we're losing so many of our colleagues to drug addiction, to alcohol addiction, and to suicide, all because of the stigma associated with self-care and seeing a counselor and getting mental health taken care of. I feel like everyone should have a counselor. I really do.
And I do too, but it's really hard, like you said, with that stigma. People aren't wanting to go, or maybe they're just not, like, they don't think that they have the time for it, so they're not fitting it in. So, do you think that mandating like these visits would be beneficial, or do you think that it would cause more problems because now you're forcing people?
Yeah, I don't know that mandating is the correct thing to do. We saw what happened when we mandated liquor out of society in the 20s and 30s.
20s, yeah.
I don't think that gaining engagement via legislation is ever truly that beneficial. But I feel like educating people is beneficial. And if a provider can listen to my story about actually participating in EMDR for 8 weeks and it essentially saving my career. This was almost 15 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And potentially keeping me from self-medicating with drugs and or alcohol, and even possibly saving me from committing suicide. I think even if we could get one person, out of 50 to agree to that, that's a tremendous win. And eventually, people will catch on. I know the younger generation is a lot more in tune with their mental health, and a lot of these younger folks are coming in. We talk to them about this and like, oh yeah, I have a counselor. I see the counselor all the time. I love it. That's one less person that I have to preach to. It's usually folks from my generation and older that I have to do a lot of evangelism for the cause.
Yeah, it's true. It is a lot of people in our time frame that are just very anti any help because it's showing as a sign of weakness, which is unfortunate. Do you think that having like group sessions might help if you're holding them at work for people to come in and talk, or?
So I know that our company has, there are days when we'll bring a bunch of counselors down, and folks can just go talk to them and meet them. And if nothing else, if it's folks from our EAP provider, it's not just counseling services they offer. They offer financial planning. They offer family counseling. They offer anger management. They offer a whole bunch of things that, a 22-year-old just coming into living on their own and learning how to pay taxes and all that, maybe they can truly benefit from the financial planning. Whereas, you get a 10 or 12-year employee who has a couple of small children, maybe they can benefit from the family counseling. So we try to get them down often, and we try to incentivize our crews to come say hi to them with food.
That's always a good way to get them in.
Yeah, bagels and coffee in there. You're probably going to get them in there, and maybe they'll at least grab a brochure. But yeah, we try to expose our folks as often as possible to opportunities to engage with the mental health resources at their disposal.
That's good. I know that company has stepped up tremendously since I've left, as far as mental health awareness and care goes. So that's fantastic to hear that you guys are doing that. That's amazing. But what would you suggest to people maybe who don't have an EAP and don't have any type of peer support program?
I would say that ultimately we are each responsible for our own health and happiness. That being said, advocate for your peers who are in crisis. And, if you're doing okay, but your partner isn't, check on them and try to be there for them if nothing else, and do your best to help them find somewhere they can go. I know that, our large services is blessed in that we have access to a ton of resources. If you don't have access to a ton of resources, I would say that you should probably, get on the phone and call these larger services that exist and ask them what they're doing and how they're doing it. Well, I would say get the yellow pages out, but those aren't around anymore. Google search, uh, see if there are counselors in your area, because oftentimes, in a smaller service, you can have a counselor that's willing to come down to the station and visit with folks and introduce themselves. And you can have like a grassroots style, access to counseling that way. There are state helplines that you can call for mental health and mental health crises. I feel like in general, the entire state is moving towards increasing their infrastructure and capacity to care for mental health emergencies. And I would say that if you're listening to this and you don't know what to do or who to call, reach out to Sam.
Yep.
Directly, and Sam can help you with navigating this, even if it's accessing the state mental crisis line, or helping you find a counselor in your area, or whatever it is. I feel like we need to be here for each other. And I say reach out to Sam. You can also reach out to any of your local officials, or even myself. I don't know how effective I'll be able to be for a lot of folks, but I think probably a lot of folks in New Mexico know who I am, and we're probably friends on Facebook. So please reach out to me, and we'll figure it out, whatever it looks like. If you live in Roy, New Mexico, and you know someone in crisis, then we'll need to figure it out. But we can't move any dirt unless we stick a shovel in the ground. So let's try to figure that out together.
I agree, and a great answer. I really like that you talked about the different aspects that EAP also helps cover, because I think it's really easy to think, oh, that that EMT or that EMS professional or that healthcare professional is really sad right now because they saw something bad. And that's maybe like the tip of the spear there. You know what I mean? That might just be the end of the line, but you don't know what they're dealing with, right? We all have our own battles that we're living through and trying to pursue through, and sometimes we just need that little bit of extra help to get us through, like you said, with a financial assistant or with a family counselor or whatever. So I really appreciate that you brought that up. Have you always wanted to be an EMT, Sean?
Um, when I was 8 years old or 9 years old, I wanted to be a video game designer.
Oh.
And that's because I played my first Atari games. Then when I hit middle school and high school, I thought that I might want to be a pastor. And then in high school, my dad attended an EMT class, and I grabbed his book and I read it in 2 days. And I thought, this is really cool. So the pursuit of seminary stalled on me. Financially, I couldn't afford it. I didn't know what to do. So I thought maybe I'll just enroll in community college, and I took an EMT course. And I was never able to get into seminary, but I was able to get into EMT school and ultimately into paramedic school. And to be honest, Sam, as a pastor, I would have been able to serve a congregation and such. I've been able to serve tens of thousands of people as a paramedic. So I truly believe I'm where I need to be, 100% without a doubt. And yeah.
You have such a positive attitude on everything, and it's just fantastic. Like, I really like that you took that and said that you could have served, that congregation, but now you're actually getting to serve literally the entire community of our state, right? Because you've been around everywhere. And earlier you mentioned like a lot of people, and somebody suggested hi Robert, that I actually interview you specifically. So that's really cool that you
Yeah.
have such a great attitude. How have you been able to keep such a positive attitude in your time of service?
Um, well, counseling is a part. I would say that my faith has has carried me through pretty much everything, and you know, I don't underestimate especially the power of my mom's prayers for basically me and my brother. She's, you know, I would say that probably the most powerful thing on this earth, you know, aside from gravity, is the power of a praying mama for her kids. I believe in the power of prayer, and I'm not here to proselytize or to preach at anybody, but I would say that it is my faith. And I don't think that I would be the individual I am were it not for my grandparents, especially my grandma Mary, the kindest person I know. When I think of individuals that I want to emulate in my life, she was always one that always had something kind to say, or maybe, you know, some food to give, and something along those lines. And my other grandparents too are wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. And you are actually a grandpa yourself, correct?
And I have three grandkids.
Three grandkids. And do you feel that you are emulating to them, or do you think that you are, being for them what your grandparents were for you?
I try, you know, I'm human, and of course, my grandma probably thought the same thing. But I, you know, seeing things through my point of view and perspective, I try. Hopefully it comes across to them in the same way that my grandma came across to me. You know, trying to just show kindness to others and emulate how you'd like to, you know, you expect to be treated, by treating others the way you expect to be treated. You know, emulating the golden rule. The challenge is they all live in Canada.
Oh, wow, that's really far away.
I get to interact with them through video conference often. We got to go to Disneyland this summer together, which was a blast.
Hmm.
But we see each other live in person once a year.
That's hard.
It is. It's really hard.
Do you have any plans to move to Canada?
Oh gosh, I would love to be able to move to Canada. Maybe when I retire.
Yeah, that's understandable. Canada's beautiful. Actually, 4% of my total listeners is from Canada. It's actually really cool.
Oh, well, I have Canadian family.
That's awesome. Well, Sean, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about anything that you feel that we haven't discussed, or if you want to, or if you have any recommendations for the people that are listening for mental health or anything that we haven't discussed already.
Well, I would I would just double down on you guys take care of yourselves and look after each other. Have a counselor that you see, you know, regularly, if not as needed. And if you suspect that someone you know or love is in crisis, assume they are, and check on them. I can't tell you the potential benefit that you might have to elicit a positive outcome in their lives is a lot greater than the potential risk of you making them mad or uncomfortable. I can't tell you the number of times that I hold regret in my heart because I did not reach out to that one individual, and they ended up committing suicide. And that's something that no one can take back. It's the ultimate end. It's it's the worst potential outcome for any bad situation. And making that individual angry with you and still having them 5 years later is a lot better scenario than not having them at all.
Not having them and then being angry at them 5 years later, right?
Yeah, and yourself for not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
You know, actions have consequences, Sam, so does inaction.
Yes.
If, as a paramedic, if you see VFib on the monitor and you don't shock it, that's tantamount to committing murder. In that you see something you can intervene with and you don't. So, you know, grow a little backbone, my friends and colleagues, and put yourself out there a little bit and check on the people you love and care for and make sure they're okay. Don't just assume they are, because they're not always okay.
Yeah. No, great advice. Well, thank you, Sean, so much for joining us on the 911 Nonsense podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. You've been phenomenal, and it's been so great catching up and seeing you today.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks. Bye, Sean.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show and want to show your support, be sure to check out the Noon merch store on Bonfire. Find the link in the description below. Also, if you have any guest suggestions or if you're interested in being a guest on Noon yourself, visit the website at www.samspursuit.com to get in touch.